Kind of a response video to Laura Layla, and I guess a little bit of a response. I was in stick camp, and Benny was in there, and Matt and Steve, and we, how do we do it? How do we make something happen in the world? How do you change anything? And so it sort of relates to what Laura Layla is saying, in the sense that she's saying that we can't be definitive. What the answer to the problem is to just say, yeah, just whatever, just embrace human individuality, embrace different kinds of values. We can't really define what's right and wrong. And yeah, I don't like, I don't go for that kind of crap. Yeah, there's certain circumstances we can't know for sure, that's right, but we know the probabilities for most things in our lives. We can analyze the situation and say, is this likely or unlikely to be good for anybody else besides me? I mean, we can certainly ask that much of a question. And that sort of answers a lot of issues where, even on the vegetarian debate, I was reading some of the comments on Rose Bushy's video, and it was just kind of funny, because now they're all talking about, oh, well, you eat a little bit of meat. It's like you don't have to have a lot of meat. We just have to have some meat. Some meat's okay. Well, I'm saying if you can go 4 or 5 days without meat, well, you can go 4 or 5 years without meat. And that's just stupid. That's a contrivance again. And so if the question is whether it's right or wrong, the question isn't, should we for no good reason do something we really don't have to do? And that's the real bottom line. If we can live without it, why shouldn't we? We should. It's because there's no benefit gained to animals being exploited. It's just silly to talk about how Daisy the cow wouldn't exist if we didn't create Daisy the cow. As I pointed out, Daisy the cow isn't much more than a Frankenstein monster. And I think Daisy would like to be put to rest. Any animal that's filling a niche where it shouldn't be. I mean, I think possums in North America probably really shouldn't exist, because they're not built for it. They don't hibernate, they freeze to death, they live a lousy, miserable, crappy life. So anyway, that's not the point I wanted to get to. I want to stick on this morality thing. And I don't think morality is really morality. Okay, that's a word invented for days when people took it from dogma, from gods, and all that kind of crap. In the modern era, human beings try to define ethics. It's what they try to seek to understand. It's what's the ethical value, what's the ethical meaning of something. We develop and create an understanding of values. We don't just accept them because somebody heard a voice in their head and said, "Thou shalt not." So anyway, if we just dispose with the thou shalt not crap and just take the good parts, the logical parts of religion, and there are a few, do unto others, have others do unto you. Well, that sort of makes sense. It seems like a nice guidepost anyway. It's something in the fog that's out there to tell us, okay, that makes sense. That's a rational place to head. But I think in the end, life is more than that. We've almost got to do better for our neighbors or something. We've got to do, because what we do for ourselves, we treat ourselves pretty freaking good, and because we're selfish, because we feel the pain, we feel the pleasure, and that's desire is going to motivate us, and that fear is going to motivate us of pain and suffering, and it's going to control our behavior in a lot of ways. And when we're making these decisions about how to move these pieces, if our emotions and our addictions and our passions are making all the decisions for us, well, then it's not likely we're gonna move the pieces the way they need to be moved for us to live a life that means something to this world, except an organism that somehow got, filled some needs inside of it, filled some deficits within it, for a few periods of time in its existence, the end. And that's all it's going to be. You can be a consumer, and you can consume less badly than somebody else, and you can say, oh, I had a good life because I wasn't as bad as that shithead. But that's really not going to do it. That's not going to mean in the end you were of net value, that you lived a good life by a rational and logical definition. You only lived that life by your own perception, and your perception doesn't really count unless it's based on something that has integrity, and because you can contrive it in your head that what you're doing makes sense, doesn't mean it does. I mean, I'll go back to the heroin addict scenario, or the alcoholic. I mean, they all have rationalizations for their behavior. They all have a perception that they're not a ludicrous, preposterous burden on every human being that comes in contact with them. They rationalize their way out of the hideous monster they've become. And I'd say human beings are basically doing that. And I'd say, again, that there is an equation out, there's a truth out there in the universe. And we're sitting there trying to find it in this fog of minimal information. I mean, I wouldn't, certainly some people think we don't have enough information to say anything. I think we have enough information to draw some conclusions. But we obviously don't know everything we need to know to say things absolutely and definitively and bang the desk and say it so nobody else can ever refute it or dispute it. But we're getting close enough on a lot of things. We can say we evolved, we can say where we came from, we can say nature doesn't have a brain, we can say there's no intelligence that designed the universe, and then we can draw the logical conclusion from that we're not likely to be designed brilliantly, that we're likely to be flawed, selfish organisms, and that the world needs more than that. The world is got a whole lot of sentience in it, and a bunch of selfish things taking nips out of each other is not rational or productive. And the word productive is a key word here.
Hard to get through your life keeping yourself happy enough to justify your existence, let alone be an influence in the world where you give more than you take. And I guess that's the simplest way to look at it. I mean, I think the equation goes deeper than that, but that's the bottom line, is how much comfort and satisfaction and prevention of suffering did you give to the world versus how much did you take? How much suffering and exploitation and misery and fucked upness did you impose on the other organisms in this world? How much did you screw the future up because you voted for the wrong man? These are huge equations, and this is huge. It's hugely important in terms of your existence and the value of it, what you endorse and what you defend and what you propagandize, you do have an influence. Maybe it's not critical, but I mean, how do you measure which vote got George Bush elected? It's not that friggin' easy. They all did. So those kind of influences have value. It's kind of hard to put to directly say that you're critical, but you're part of it. You're critical in the sense that it couldn't happen without you. At least without the group that is you, the group you joined. So it's tricky balancing all this stuff, but I don't see any rational point in saying there isn't black and white in the world, because there is black and white. There's parts that we can see. There's enough contrast in the world we're looking at, in the fog, for us to see the black and the white, for us to see the good and the evils, to know the probabilities, that this is likely to be this and this is likely to be that. We can at least say that much. And I think it's kind of silly just to say that we have to embrace every aberration of diversity that pops into a human consciousness. I think that's just nonsense. All values aren't equal. All philosophies aren't equal. Some have more integrity, and that integrity has to be valued based on something called rationality and logic and knowledge. These are important components to good thinking and rational ideas, meaningfully accurate perceptions. And I guess that's the bottom line, is this perception. What do you perceive this as? And is that perception based on something rational, or is it just based on the same mechanism that provokes some emotion in you when you see a Big Mac or a kitten? I mean, if it's nothing more than a physical response, if that's all you're doing is physically reacting to your world, like I said, then you're not going to be playing chess. Okay, you're not going to be playing the game. You're not going to be in the game in any rational way. You're just going to be moving in random and idiotic ways that aren't going to be conducive, or aren't going to be likely to produce a productive life, an efficient life, at minimum. I mean, that's at least, like I said, that's at least the minimum you ought to be striving for, is some sense of efficiency. Let alone living a good life. You've got to avoid living a bad life, being a destructive influence on the world. So it's all really important, and it really, it's hard, because the people who understand the equation and are trying to do this, it's hard to know what's right. It's hard to say this is what I should do and this is what I shouldn't do, to change things. I mean, did I fuck everything up because I did this? Did I miss an opportunity? Did opportunity knock and I was in the bathroom? I mean, what the hell? It isn't easy, but we do know what's likely. We know what effort and what work needs to be done, what we have to do, and it's just finding the motivation and the compulsion to invest in it. You know, some of it's inconvenient to our personal satisfaction. That's the bottom line. I mean, you're going to have to pay to be productive. It's not going to be free. You're personally going to have to pay. You can't be both personally satisfied and productive. It's just not a likely scenario. Life isn't that fair, okay? Because it's crude forces, remember, that built the damn thing. Fairness has nothing to do with it. Like Clint Eastwood would say, deserve has nothing to do with it. All right, this isn't a game of deserve and fair. It's a game that you got to play with strategy, and you got to work hard at, and there's no guarantees, and it's fucked up. It's a fucked up game, and but we should at least try our best, whatever that is. We should at least every day have those wheels turning, saying, okay, what's the effort I'm going to make today? I mean, I can be a selfish bastard some of the time, but some time I got to spend on figuring out if I'm being a good human being or not. It's an important fucking question to ask yourself.